Hello and welcome to the All Stats No Res podcast. Today on the podcast we have me, HP Munchcraft, we have Ravsier, we have Sauron, and we have Darkwolf. Unfortunately, no Charlie, so you won't get to hear his beautiful intros. But today we are going to be discussing the MA C'tis Marshmaster. And while we will be telling you whether he's Pog or Dog, we want to discuss him specifically in the context of how the understanding of the Marshmaster has evolved through time. The Marshmaster, when Dominions 5 was first released, was seen as one of the best mages in the game. He was seen that way because Horde of Skeletons and Foul Vapors were known in Dom 4 and were already known to be a powerful combination of spells in Dom 4 to Dom 5. When it changed over, they continued to be powerful. Also, he does not require a temple and produces 17 research, making him one of the fastest researching mages in the era, if not the fastest researching mage in the era. But as Dominions 5 has evolved, the buzz around him and his status as the best mage, or whatever, has dropped. People have stopped talking about MA C'tis and the Marshmaster. So what we want to ask is, Marshmaster, is it still Pog, or has it gone to the dogs? So, what do we think?
Uh, I think I think they're still pretty pog. I think in light of changes in the meta, particularly um, I want to say the proliferation of resistances as minor blesses that are very cheap and easy to pick up, the accessibility of foul vapors, where every Marshmaster can cast foul vapors, is not as strong as it used to be. And similarly, the access to Poison Cloud is also not as strong as it used to be. Some of the nature utility is a little bit lesser, but I think it's still a strong mage.
I think the mage is very solid for its role. I think it has a lot of things as C'tis that you want to be doing, but I don't think it's as crazy as what people kind of put the buzz around it. I think like later in the game, there's some cool stuff you can do, but I feel like early it's not as insane outside of sitting there and researching. But the site searching is phenomenal if you can,
True.
because he has so many paths, right? So
Yes.
you get a lot of value that way, but I don't think he is as insane as people thought he was.
That's fair. And Darkwolf?
I I actually, and this is a hypothesis of mine, I think the extreme I think it was actually very extreme how strong people viewed it as was because when people first started playing Dom 5, I'm not gonna like talk about average skill level too much, but I'd argue people's knowledge of the game is kind of lacking. And Skelly spam is one of those basic noob stomper strategies that players that don't know how to deal with 10 mages casting Horde of Skeletons over and over again with like relief up or something. They can just fold to it. And I think the Marshmaster, like as a chassis, was viewed as super strong because good players saw stuff they can do with it, people that brought over a lot of experience or were able to quickly adapt. And then like the new players were getting stomped by it. But as the average skill level's grown and people have become more knowledgeable, I just feel like the straight strategy of dumping skeletons, like it doesn't work. I'm not going to say it's bad, but it's people actually know the counters to it and people know how to handle it. So a lot of the perceived like overemphasis on the mage has fallen away.
I would agree with that as well. As for me, I still think this is a very strong mage and still probably one of the strongest in age. I'll go out on a limb and say that. Um, I do agree with you that some of his initial success was based on being having these very easy to grasp combos and noob stomper tactics. But I think that if you look at it again in the context of how the meta has developed and what all we've learned, this guy still has a ton of tricks now. He has even more tricks up his sleeve. He doesn't have to rely on just two spells for which are still good, which are still fine, but he doesn't have to rely on just those two spells to get combat utility. So I think he is still very, very strong. And now, even perhaps a little bit underestimated, because as players have discovered how to use some of those, what were at the start of the game, less useful mages, as players have started to use those more and more, they've developed those tactics and buzz around them, but they haven't really returned to the Marshmaster to discuss, like, okay, what all tactics are now available to him beyond the just bleedingly obvious.
So let me chime in. I think like the Marshmaster kind of lends itself into a style of play that probably isn't as prominent anymore. But some players still do it, and that's going to be your stalling play. So we mentioned at the beginning Horde of Skeletons and Foul Vapors, but you can combine it with other things to make it even stronger. So you can throw stuff like Quagmire and Rigor Mortis, and all these things that your objective is to put the enemy to sleep, and then you will eventually win because your guys aren't affected by Rigor, and the skeletons will kill everything that's asleep, and no one that's asleep will wake up. So it's a style of play that's, I would say, not as prominent as it was maybe in like 2020 or 2019. I feel like stall was very common then. But the big issue with stall is that you have to commit a lot of mages in order for it to work, and you only can move around with those mages one province at a time. So it's not. It's very doomstacky, and there's a lot of issues with doomstacks in general. How like you can't cover as much ground, but in actual big fights, it's still like the strategy hasn't got weaker. There hasn't been any patches to the spells that make them inherently weaker. It's just I think people maybe don't I guess
People play around
clash
it
as much.
instead of playing into it. Is that what you're
Yeah, I
saying?
mean if you play into
Stalling
it,
is
it's so much better, right? But if you ignore it or if you try to avoid it, it's not as good.
it requires a very specific setup for one side to be able to use the stall to kill the other. And C'tis, it is harder to pull off that setup than some other nations might find it. For example, famously, the top kill nations have a much easier time using something like Rigor Mortis because they're not affected by it. C'tis has to factor in if they can you get enough out of their mages before Rigor Mortis shuts them down as well. Right, so it's a little bit harder to set up on them, and so it's I would say even harder overall strategy to pull off, although still very powerful when used correctly.
I mean, you can still twice spawn and you can do the transform stuff. There's life after death later in the game to make like the
Right.
stall armies even better. So as long as you get the masters undead, like your stall tactic, you can do as most nations as long as they have the path access. And having rigor plus foul vapors plus one either grip or heat from hell is pretty important. If you can have earth magic for recursive stones, or even using some of the water spells that I think probably don't get as much love nowadays, but are actually kind of interesting. I don't think there's a lot of attention on it, but
yeah, I do want to
bring
mention
up
that
something else. Go ahead. Sorry.
I do want to mention that they're also they also cast relief without too much effort, I believe.
I believe
Is
you.
that a N4 or N5? I forget.
I believe relief is N5, so they would actually need a Thistle Mace on the nature randoms.
Yeah, so you need a Thistle Mace on the nature random, and then you need to gem up to it. But that's eminently doable. That's going to be 1 in 4 of your mages, and so you can have rigor relief stacks on your big army fights.
Absolutely. And the other thing I do want to point out is we've brought up a lot that they have access to foul vapors, but they have very serviceable nature mages, right?
Yeah.
So they can really do most things that you would want to do with nature magic. They're available to them. I'm trying to think if they're missing any important cross paths, but I think the nature water cross path is the main one for nature. So they're not really missing anything.
They're missing
Nature Earth.
Yeah, nature Earth, which isn't a huge cross
Oh,
path.
that's for Strength of Gaia, right?
Yeah, so it means they're either reliant on their randoms or reliant on Thistle Maces or both for their big nature. But I think that's fine. The fact that they even have that puts them above a lot of MA nations.
Yeah, they're going to have Nature 2 on every single Marshmaster, and they have decent odds for Nature 3, so they should have enough of them to, particularly by the mid game, to get done what they need done. And they can, if they really need
Yeah.
to, they do have actual randoms on the Marshmaster as well. So they can use either Marshmasters or their Shamans, which they still have access to for higher level Nature in a pinch if they need to.
Yeah. One thing I do want to bring up on these guys, because I think this is where the meta has evolved to and is underutilized in these guys specifically, is as nature mages, they are actually very good for army buffs. You have Mass Prot, which against anything but a Fire Nation is very good. Will increase your survivability. You'll have Army of Giants, Relief we already mentioned. You'll get Mass Regen. You'll be able to cast all those spells on your army. So while you don't have the Earth for like Army of Gold, and it's really well, it'll take a lot of shamans for you to get the astral for like Will of the Fates or something. You're still nature have very efficient nature army buffs, and if you say like put like Mass Prot and then Army of Giants on elite warriors, for example, they get pretty fucking nasty in the
Uh,
late game,
I
or in the mid
don't
game.
know if I agree with that. Uh, you do have the buffs as the like natively with the pass, but the big issue with statistics, honestly, if you click on all their units, is they have natural prot, and generally when your nation has natural prot across its units, it's actually kind of a negative when you have nature, because you lose some of that value from Bark Skin. So I would kind of disagree with you there. They do have
Well,
all the other buffs, but you don't get the full value of Bark Skin, unfortunately.
on your Sobex, but I think it's worth noting on like all of your other troops, specifically the ones you see the most often, the Elite Warriors and they only
It's only
have in the
+7.
Falconeers.
Yeah, it's you're
+7
getting
is still a good chunk
you're
of prop.
getting +7 on your elite warriors rather than +10 that you would on a human, so it's less good, and they have only like a scale curious, so their armor is like less good. And then on your lizards who have 5 nat prot, you're only getting +5. But I think like if you just put it in those terms, while I'm getting a +7 or a +5 to my nat prot, that's still like a very good thing to have. And I think it gets overlooked for the reasons you mentioned. But I think that yeah, if you're in C'tis and you're going into the mid game and late game, think a little bit about what your army buffs can do, not just about the Horde of Skeleton tactics, but what and rigor. Although those are powerful, but like think about like, hey, what if I just made my elite warriors like, what if I just made them better?
Yeah, it gets them to 18. It gets them to 18, which is a very solid quantity.
Is it 18? Let me double check.
Yeah, I just googled it.
You Googled it?
Yeah, I looked at the prop map.
Okay. Oh God. Please, to our audience, do not look at the prop map. It is heinous. It is it is
Yeah,
eye
let me
cancer.
actually.
It will hurt you very badly.
If we're looking at how quickly you can research, the main things that we're worried about is the gold cost egregious? I think for a six path mage, it's not an egregious gold cost.
Agreed.
And then the other question is, how many research points do you get per commander point that is required to make them? And if we're looking in the Middle Age, to my knowledge, the only thing with more CP or research per CP is the Royal Malky, which I think we can all agree the gold cost on that is egregious enough that you can't really use it as a researcher.
Agreed.
And so the only other mage that researches as quickly as a Marshmaster is the MA Abyssia Warlock, which is probably in the top 3 strongest blood mages in the game. So it's in rare competition in the age for speed of getting to your research goals.
So for reference, this guy is 2 command points, and he is any fort, and he doesn't require a temple. So you're getting fast research for like very normal and very reasonable investment. This guy doesn't require anything else, but you essentially have your shamans, which do require a temple, but they're the more efficient mage that you turn to when you're gold capped, and then you have the Marshmaster, which is your very, very fast mage that will research you up very, very quickly. And just get out of bidding for it, and is a competent battle mage. So I think
Yeah,
this guy is like still very, very strong.
and I think that's a key point to make is there's actually I think a lot of good researchers in the game, whether it's from an efficiency or research to gold perspective. But this is a researcher that almost no matter what you research, like which path, or not which path, which type of research, conj, alteration, whatever, it can do something, which means you can buy a bunch of these to research. And if something happens, you go to war earlier than your research goal, you'll still got stuff to do.
Yeah. Well, I know that this guy can do evos, but I would not want to go up evo with him, if that makes sense. He has not got the best paths for evocation. I
I
think
might go to Evocation 3 just for the Sleep Cloud at some point.
That's
But
fair.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Sleep
Sleep Cloud.
Clouds seems good. And to update people, it's not 18 prod, it's 16. So it was
It's
kind of what
18
I
body.
thought. It's not as.
well,
It's not 18.
It's 18 body. Come on.
it's
Oh
Yeah, I
no!
don't know.
Oh no! Oh, look, this is too in the weeds. All right, so it's 18 body prot and 16 overall prot because you don't.
And
The
10
guy
head.
doesn't. The bastard doesn't have a helmet. Okay.
Yeah,
come on.
so
You got to give them
you're adding whatever. The point is, he's in like the average intervals where going from 10 to 16 is gonna fucking make a difference, right? Because it'll help certainly with the math, but like when he's like running into PD and stuff, if like Prot was his only buff, like it's not gonna make a big difference. Like
I mean, I
indies-
think if he was running into PD, it would make a difference because it would
Yeah, I
go
don't know
from
what you're talking
being
about.
a glass cannon to being a reasonable unit.
like if an
I think if the enemy is running like strength, then it may not matter so much. Because
Yeah.
if the enemy is running things that could kill him easily, you have to put like Will of the Fates or some shit on him.
yeah, he's much better with the astral buffs. Like if But I like you mentioned the nature ones, and that's why I'm bringing it up. Like it doesn't make a big enough difference, just prot wise.
Oh,
I mean,
But
I
the
would
astral
cast
buffs are always good.
And just to bring something up, they also have access to things like Howl and Creeping Doom
Yeah.
and
All the
the
nature.
Mass Berserk spell, Charm, Curse of the Frog.
Really?
We we didn't mention Howl with the stall package, but it is yet
Yeah.
another part of it because if you Howl, you have infinite wolves, and they do pull triple duty in that package. Really, they are a stall mechanism because they just come in and distract enemy troops. Then they're also part of a kill mechanism. The wolves will fatigue out, but it'll take them a long time to do so because they don't have any encumbrance, and they're just going to chip away at downed enemies. And they are also a catch mechanic because if enemies wake up and try to retreat, the wolves coming in the back of the map will eventually get them.
And I think really, I think it's like worth bringing up and really focusing on like we talk about these spells that people know about, right? And that's part of why the mage was viewed as so good when the game came out, but why I feel like it's fallen almost into, I don't want to say underrated, but out of focus, is because as people play, we've discovered all this new tech. But you see someone play MA C'tis, and they still do the same shit, right?
Yeah.
Like MA C'tis play has not advanced to the level most nations have when it has the tools to. Like there's so much stuff it can do, whether luxury or efficiency, such as to counteract the stuff that after the beginning Dominions rush started countering it, right? Because, you know, like after the first phase, people started finding out how sacreds work. You're like, oh, this nation sucks. You don't have good sacreds, whatever, whatever. But as time's gone on, people have like found out about cubes, found out about all these things, and there's a bunch of even more niche techs that the nation actually does really well. That
What do you mean
even
people
we
have-
didn't.
People haven't
What?
found out about shit. What do you mean? The community. Well,
Okay.
that's the point of this podcast. We're highlighting stuff that the community doesn't do. The community doesn't move. What do you mean? Don't lie to people.
To be
Yeah.
fair, the community does know about cubes, and on that measure, 1/4 of the Marshmasters are cube makers. Now they aren't the most efficient nation, for making cubes. Like a Naked Water 2 is going to be your most efficient cube mage, obviously. But the fact that they get all this other shit, and then they also, oh, oops, well, if we have to deal with elite raiders or whatever, oops, we just have cubes too. Fuck you, like, oh, they're ethereal, whatever, like, it's just another advantage of this goofy mage.
Well, it's they're not the best cube nation. When you only can pay prot and even body ethereal, it's not the best.
Regen is useful though. I like.
Yeah, you
regen
can paint regen on them.
Yeah, but the prot really matters. I feel like in my testing, it's still notable. Like you do get moss body and prot, so maybe like with moss body prot and body ethereal, it should be enough. But I don't know.
It depends on what your
when
cube
I was
is.
testing versus yes, I think prot larger regen was enough.
Yeah, it's really on the line versus certain counters, but it's still passable.
I mean, it's still
not
something
the
they
best.
do. And I don't think most people looking at MA C'tis are like, yeah, you can use cubes to solve your problem. But they just can. Like, in addition to everything else they can do. They just can use cubes.
The Sobek guards, by the way, are really nasty sacred. If you guys want some history, Red Rob in Dominion's Unpantsed, as you like to call it, made these guys, like, you could recruit up to like 3 of them. And they were quite the menace.
I would absolutely love if we could recruit more of them. I think I'm not sure why exactly they're so hard to recruit when you can recruit like any number of giant frost giants, right? Seems a little bit.
C'tis is a diverse nation.
They're one of the better sacred.
Many species. So
if you could get more, I think C'tis would be so much more fun to play in the early game. It would just be.
I mean, I'd unironically
so
run
scary.
You mean so much more broken in the early game?
I think
C'tis broken. Come on, man. Just raise the price by 20 or something.
Listen, unlike nations like Marion, where like the sacreds pull a lot of the nation, C'tis is very well rounded in the sense that it has like a solid roster of mages and it has a solid roster of units. Granted, the first 4 are dumpster tier, and Ilwinter should really fix that.
Yeah.
But other than that, the rest of them I mean, Militia has its place, but like they have the same 4 units across all 3 areas. For those who don't know, it's literally the same 4 unit IDs copied from LA, EA, and MA. So that's where my comments are coming from. And that's the same with the Falconeer.
And they believe their mighty lizard gnat prot means that they do not have to wear a hat, and that is simply untrue. They get owned.
No, the heavy infantry wears a hat.
Yeah, I was about to say heavy infantry.
Heavy infantry wears a hat. Hey.
It's just the Mooch who are hat haters. Mooch are hat haters. That's all you need to know.
The elite
for whatever reason, Ilwinter has decided no Mooch hats.
Falconeers also wear hats. Of course, they're also carrying crappy one-handed spears, which I don't know if anybody here listening knows this, but I do not like how bad one-handed spears are in this game because they're bad.
Yeah,
but they're just bad. Like almost any other weapon is worse.
That's actually
like they're just bad.
That's actually why Rob's That's why Rob's most played nation is Jomon, because they don't have one-handed spears.
They don't have one-handed spears.
No, can we go an episode without a Jomon reference? I don't think so.
I didn't even bring it up this time. Don't blame me.
Yeah, it was Dark Wolf. Yeah,
no. But I think as a pod, we can't go one episode without Jomon referencing. It's just like someone's gonna break, someone's gonna fail. So the Marsh
every time Jomon's referenced
the Marshmaster. Going back to the Marshmaster, I want to bring up some of the out of combat things, and I want to bring up the fact that this guy can forge, how many boosters this guy can forge, and how much path access you get off this one mage. So Nature 2 automatically forges a Thistle Mace, then you have a Nature Astral cross path, give him the Thistle Mace, he forges a Moonvine bracelet, so you get 2 nature boosts. Add that to your Nature 3 random, you're in Mother Oak territory, just off your nation and Const 6. Then you have the Death 2, who forges a Skull Staff. You can give it to the Death 3, now you're Death 4. You're not up to Death 5, you need an Empower for that, but It is
Or get
what
the
it
lucky
is.
ring.
HB, you missed the fact that with the 2 boosters that he forged in nature, he gets up to the
Tree Lord
Tree Lord
staff.
staff.
Tree Lord
yes.
staff. Yes,
Also,
you
Yeah,
missed the
nature
booster.
6
Gets-
for gift of health. or
yeah, he
whatever.
gets he gets up to nature 6. If you want to recruit human mages in this nation, which you'll need to stop your dumbass Dominion from diseasing them.
I believe you need swamp survival for it, and they have to
Or
be
being sacred. Being sacred.
Yes.
Or being cold-blooded, which is why, actually, Zabalba, as a disciple of Tis, is completely immune to
Oh, it's
their
not complete.
miasma because all of their units have cold-blooded, sacred, or swamp survival.
Oh, okay. Then
You mean EA slash?
Then you
LA?
have the water. You have a water 1, but 1/4 of your guys are going to be water 2. It's not your best cross path, but your water 2 will forge any water will forge the little water ring at construction 6, which makes your water 2s water 3s, which forges them robe of the sea, and now you're water 4. So you do get
You get the naiads too, to be clear, so you can
Yes.
scale up water.
So from this one mage, you get a shitload of access in the 3 main paths it has, and the astral guy, while he is not going to give you, he's only going to give you the Moonvine bracelet in terms of out of combat access. The astral guy can kind of, with Power of the Spheres, just ersatz take the job of any one of the other guys in combat with either Power of the Spears or a small.
So one thing I want to bring attention to that's not been mentioned. So the Marshmaster, like some mages in the game, is not sacred, and why? Outside of like the obvious things with being sacred, other than getting your bless, sacred means you are generally have half the upkeep. So whenever you're using mages like this, it's always a good idea to be cognizant of how many you have. So just to put in perspective, every Marshmaster you have is negative 15 gold per turn. It's 15.666 repeating. So it'll round up probably. But yeah, you essentially lose 50% of your gold every time you make one of these. So you have to be careful how many you have.
Yes.
That's like the major issue with Machaka, MA Machaka sorceresses. They're a solid mage, but you're spamming them, and then all of a sudden you have no gold because they're not sacred. And
True. However, I think one of the things about this nation is I would rather run out of gold on these than on fucking the Machakan Sorcerer, because only some of them are going to really be useful, whereas this guy is got, even if he didn't have a random, he would have good functionality, like good function out of the box. And then he has the random, which gives you like it really all gas. I don't think there's a dud. Like the astral can be underwhelming since you already have the other stuff, but I don't think
if you're going up alteration, it's just all hits.
I think there's no dud here.
There is no dud. The only dud you could maybe argue is like hitting water 3 when you don't need the booster. And even then you could be like, oh, Quagmire, but
Quagmire caster, it's your water elemental caster if you need to.
I personally do not value high water, high fire, unless I'm using the specific spells that are in the game. We were having a conversation podcast about this, but I personally believe like getting higher in the fire / water early in the game doesn't do a lot, and I don't value it.
I don't think it's super valuable early in the game.
I
think it's valuable later.
I would agree that it's not valuable early, but I think the value on the water random early is that when you go enchantment. That's another thing about these. So much of the synergy is in Foul Vapors, Rigor Mortis, Horde of Skeletons.
Relief.
Relief is all in enchantment, and then the water 2 gets cubes, which is also up enchantment. So the enchantment 4/5 power spike is like nutty for this nation. And
it's like an enchantment alteration nation.
So it's like when your water mages don't have a
Yeah,
whole lot of
thaumaturgy. It's a
tech,
combination.
you can get
Yeah.
use out of them. And I do want to bring up one. Sorry if I'm moving fast or running over people, but I do want to bring up one again underutilized aspect of him, because while he is probably too expensive to be used as a point buff mage or a buff mage regularly, he can. All these have a variety of good point buffs that they can do in a pinch when you absolutely need it.
What do you mean? Can you
So,
elaborate?
Moss Body. I wouldn't. Normally, you don't
Yeah.
want this guy casting Moss Body because he's 240 fucking gold, right? 235. So, it's normally a waste. You don't want to cast it on, like, troops. But if you really need to buff Blob or put Moss Body in, like, a cube or a thug or a super combatant, you can do it. Same with enlarge, same with quickness, same with
I mean, yeah, he's going to be.
Yeah.
You're absolutely using this guy to give a regeneration or enlarge, because otherwise you have to use a gem on a shaman. So,
Yeah.
yes.
As well. I think you go straight up alteration. You put all the buffs you want onto your Sobex, because those are your most elite troops, right?
Yeah,
And you
Sober
cast Swarm.
Warriors.
You go straight alt forward. You cast Swarm. You put all the point buffs on them. They walk forward, surrounded by chaff to eat all the unnecessary hits and chop everybody out.
I'm not sure what exactly my default strategy would be with this nation, but I think they're absolutely ripe for brewing, because I think the goodness of this mage has meant that they've gone through Dom 5 being just like a solid scales nation. And that's fine. It's fine to be a solid scales nation, but it has also meant that I don't think they've been cooked to the extent that other nations have been. And I think there's like potential in the sacreds, or potential to do things with the nation that, like, you know, might be a little bit weird and off the beaten path, but have just not been explored because the scales just place to scales is just so functional because of the Marshmaster.
I feel like a nation gets quote unquote cooked, according to you, because there's not as many options. Like as C'tis, you can literally go like a thaumaturgy start, you can go an enchantment start, you can go an alteration start, you can go a conj. It has many different avenues it can go that are all solid, and you're not gonna quote unquote be like overly punished for going any of these, in my opinion. Like like maybe like a conj start is like the worst out of the ones I listed, but like the other three, you know, there's a reasonable like argument you could have, and you could build your strategy around it, and that's cool. But not all nations can do that, because, you know, either their mages suck, or, you know, they have good mages but they have terrible troops. Like, look at Bogaris. Granted, Bogaris is a whole different topic, but as an example,
we'll get to it.
That might not be the most interesting episode, but that's a lighter one.
I don't know. Hot take. I think the terribleness of Bogaris' troops is overrated because they're cost efficient. But that's that's an entirely different thing.
Oh, you should actually get some special guests for some of the people that might have like more insight on some of these nations. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things you could do with C'tis. Maybe they're not as cooked because people aren't as pushed. Like, people used to, like, I remember Blokes back in the day. He would try to Ashdod rush down C'tis, and he would still be unsuccessful. and C'tis was, or sorry, not C'tis. Blokes was very, he was very determined to like rush down like nations like C'tis, or nations that were commonly like overtalked in the community. So just being able to withstand, you know, a player like that, says its stuff all on itself. I'm slurring my words.
Yeah, didn't Kronbum beat him in a duel? I don't know if we should be.
Hold on now.
That's actually fake news. I will not let
That's
you lie across the
contention.
internet.
That's big drama.
That's big drama and big false
Also,
information.
It's like 2 or 3 year old drama at this point, isn't it? Maybe
Oh,
two.
it's ancient.
It's
He
fucking
won that
drama.
duel, by the way.
Blokes
He-
unfortunately isn't even fucking in the community anymore, and Krun is so fucking heavily banned and restricted that he's almost not in the community.
Censored.
Yeah, but Krun has been censored and canceled. Well, I can't even say unfortunately. He has been
Not
censored
without
and canceled.
reason, let us
Yeah,
say.
but
Yeah.
you know, sucks that it had to happen, but it probably had to happen.
Yeah, I think you've tried numerous times to rid of him of his chains, and you keep on getting swatted down. I can
Anyway.
reference some other drama, but I'll leave that out of it.
We want to.
I think we're almost done. If I could just say one more statement.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go
go
for it.
I think one of the things we've been mentioning is not just the Marshmaster, but also how important it is to Satis. And at the end of the day, you can't really approach it separate from the nation. But also, if you approach the nation at all, you're going to notice that the Marshmaster is by far the most important commander in their lineup. Because it is one of basically only two mages that they really get access to, aside from their mage assassin. So really, any play that you're going to make with Satis, almost any play, is going to include, at least peripherally, what you're doing with your Marshmasters. So
I don't know
when
if
we
I agree
approach
with you.
how good is the Marshmaster, we also ask ourselves, what kind of plays does Satis need to do?
Well, let's rewind. Would the Marshmaster be as good on Satis if Satis didn't have the Shaman? That's a good question. I don't think he is.
The Marsh.
I think he is still just
Well,
as good.
it depends
I don't think
on,
he
it
is.
depends
I
on
disagree.
what he's replaced with. I think the
Well,
Marsh.
what if he was like Marion and you didn't get a replacement?
I
what
mean,
if you
well,
just-
hold on. If you
Think about it.
if you just got the Marshmaster, he would still be very, very.
He would
good
still
and
be
versatile.
crazy, but he wouldn't be as good. Like he would.
Why not?
I think he
Question, why
he
not?
wouldn't be as good without the Shaman because the Shaman, both communions and like the Shaman on its own doesn't
Efficiency.
make fucking boosters, right? It's
an
so,
efficient mage too.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
efficient.
it's 145 less gold.
It's
and-
not just an efficient
Oh,
mage. The Shaman is an S1 N1,
Right.
and he's gonna do a lot of like the jobs you don't want to have the Marshmaster do. I would actually argue if you rip the Shaman out of this nation, I think the Marshmaster isn't as good because then you're gonna have the Machaca issue where you're gonna have a bunch of these and he's just not gonna be as good.
Well, that's
You'll
why
have no
I
gold.
bring up the shoot. I just had a
The Shaman makes the
that's why I
Marshmaster.
bring up the replacement issue because I think if you the Marshmaster and the Shaman synergize very well together as the Shaman's the cheap efficient one who does the like dirty individual buffing that the Marshmaster is too high and mighty to do, and the Marshmaster does all the big battlefield magic. I think if you replace the Shaman with another big mage, then the nation would start to chug, and you'd have this like weird tension where you're buying one big mage or the other, and you'd have to control your amount of labs, and it'd be crazy. But I think that if you replace the Shaman with another cheap mage, like if you replace them with the like Soothsayer, or you replace it with the
No, think
Imperial
about it.
Geomancer.
No,
right?
you would never get that kind of mage because look at LA Satis. They
True.
replaced the Shaman with the fucking Reborn. If you had the Reborn,
yeah, the
instead of
nation would get a lot
Shaman,
worse.
This nation would suck.
But still,
This
if you
nation would
replace,
suck.
again, if you want to go to LA Satis, I think if you replace the Marshmaster with the fucking LA Satis Fire Death shit ass fucking Sarumancer, they're like, yeah, this guy's way fucking worse than the Marshmaster. Like, sure, he's Death 3.
No, but
sure
he's
he has
sacred.
No.
Fade
I
Fire.
think like if you had one side that just had like the Marshmaster, but no Shaman, and the other side had like the Sarumancer and the Shaman, I think the Shaman side with the Sarumancer is way better than just having the Marshmaster. Because
I don't know if that's
Right.
true.
I
I
just
disagree.
disagree.
I just don't think the big
I
mage
think it's a
cares
lot
this.
closer than you'd think, so I think it would
Yeah,
be close.
I'll be honest.
I don't
You also have to keep in mind the Sarumancer is somehow 50 gold more expensive.
for less
You
power.
have to
he's
understand,
sacred,
like that
yeah.
nation is it has like the Sarumancer isn't that bad, but
Yeah,
But-
he's
well,
only
if-
like
if
I
this-
will
like,
agree that
185
giving the
gold.
nation the shaman instead of the reborn would be a massive boost because then they don't have like borderline worst research in the age, right? Or
Like,
research
I'm just like
efficiency.
thinking about this, like low cost mages that you get like a garbage path in, like Deathfire or like water. I don't know.
Believe me,
Water Earth is not-
I've used the Machatka Witch Doctor. I know what you're talking about.
Like it really does matter when you think about it, because if you just look at the Marshmaster on its own, it's like, yeah, he's really good, but it's like
Well,
he has something that helps
There are other
enable him.
parallels too.
'Cause then his
the Oceania
path-
problem too. Oceania has the exact same issue. They just don't have a mid-tier mage.
Like if you didn't have an astral cheap mage as MA C'tis, like all of a sudden that astral random is terrible.
True.
It is.
I don't
That
think
is
that's
true.
It is
I don't
terrible.
think that's true.
I
Magic
I
Duel is a
disagree.
real
threat.
It's
Eh,
having
Magic Duel is
a
a real
quarter
threat.
of your mages just randomly vulnerable to Magic Duel, and then the only
true.
real,
That is the late age.
the only
issue with
real
all those.
upside to them being Moonvine Bracelet, right? I guess you could
Yeah,
power
you
the
know,
spheres.
all of a sudden that path is trash.
Yeah, like imagine making a communion with just Marshmaster.
Yeah, so
would suck.
Like, are you starting to come around when I'm saying, like, wait a second?
No, because I think you're cleaving off half the nation, and then you're comparing it, but you're not comparing what you would do if you cleft off the other half of the nation. Like if you
Well,
had, if you replaced like the Marshmaster with the Bandar Log big nature astral guy, then the nation would also blow because you'd have no fucking paths. So they work well together, you know? Like it's a 4-path nation, and one mage has 3 paths, and the other mage has one of them.
Yeah, but I think it goes hand in hand with nations. Like, if your cheap mage is like borderline unusable, then it really impacts your play. Like in Machaka's case, where you have a big mage who can do stuff, but the smaller mage is so bad that it's borderline not worth making, but you end up making them.
I don't know if I
Research.
agree with that.
The Marshmaster, if you were making them like every turn you could, and some people might do this, that's not good because
Year one, I might.
like because the shaman is what you want to be recruiting most of the time, and you want to sprinkle in the Marshmasters to do those important things.
Actually,
I wouldn't want to.
it depends on what you're doing, because I think that if you have more of a Marshmaster base, then you're using fewer forts and you're using fewer battle mages, but you're only using your battle mages to cast very big, important spells, right? Because you are
Or Horde
Go-
skeletons.
right. You were going up research very quick. If you are doing the shaman, you are a very infrastructure heavy build because you have to have temples everywhere, which you may want anyway. You want to spread your dom, but you have to have temples everywhere, and you have to build more forts to get him out of. This is an advantage of the shaman. You can get 3 of them for the price of a Marshmaster, or more than 3 of them, 3 and change, nearly 4, for the price of a Marshmaster. But on the other side of that, building enough infrastructure to actually get those 4 shamans instead of a Marshmaster is much, much more expensive. Do we think, or do each of you think, because we may not agree, do you think that the Marshmaster is still the sort of mage it was in early Dom, where it is one of the best mages in the age, or do you think that it deserves the neglect that it's getting, where people don't focus on it anymore, or somewhere in the middle? Who wants to start?
So Storm go first.
All right, Soran, what do you think?
I'm in the middle. I think the mage is very good in the sense that it can enable a lot of stuff, but I don't think it's. I'm not convinced that it's as crazy as it was. I don't know. I'm on the fence. I'm not like a real believer in some of the nature stuff you were mentioning, honestly. And I don't know. I'm in the middle. It's a very solid mage, and I would want it as a lot of nations if I could.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's. like people would like made a big stink about how amazing it was, and then like no one plays C'tis, so it's like,
Yeah.
is it as good? Why aren't you guys playing it if it's so amazing? It's so wonderful.
So I will pick that up and give my take. I think that it is still one of the best mages in the game. Surprise, surprise. But or maybe not the game. Maybe the age is a better way of putting it. But I think it is a huge asset to the nation. And I think one of the reasons why C'tis has become overlooked is because it was so solid for so long that nobody bothered cooking anything up with this nation. They were just like, oh, it's C'tis. They're a scales nation. You can do scales. You just do scales. And then you cast Horde of Skeletons and Rigor Mortis. And it's cookie cutter and boring. And then, but when you actually think a little bit more in depth, there's a lot more that both the Marshmaster and the nation could do. And I think at this point it has looped all the way back around at the end of Dom 5 to being undervalued and underutilized. And that's where I am.
I think simply because I have not seen them or used them in such a long time, probably going on 2 years now. I think I would tend to go that they're somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
Because until you actually go into a game and you use a mage in such a way that you're showing how strong it is, you can't really definitively say that it is that strong. And I would love to play C'tis again, I think, in kind of a more focused game and try and see if I could figure out stuff that works with them or do some tests with them, see what kind of things they can cast that's effective, and just, give them a shot again.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of room there to explore still.
I think honestly that the mage is, and to kind of link off what everyone else said, that the mage is still a very, very good mage. And its capabilities are actually very strong. I just think the ways it's strong have changed from when Dominions, like the Dominions meta, first started. And I think because of that, people underestimate it, or maybe not underestimate it, but they think of it as like old news. But people forget that as all of this new knowledge and tech comes out, that the nation of C'tis and in essence the Marshmaster can use a lot of this new tech through their paths and through their mage chassis.
All right. I kind of agree with that. I want to add a slight addendum because people are putting this in the text channel instead of in the podcast like cowards. What addendum?
Well, listen, he was talking. Listen. Okay, we missed it. Yes.
All right,
okay,
go.
I completely forgot about this. You can it doesn't matter what the random is. You can Foul Vapors bomb every fucking turn in every province, and we completely forgot to mention. That's so stupid.
Yes, as you don't have to do Foul Vapors as part of a big army fight. You can just have your stupid Foul Vapors guys behind your stupid PD. Killing small enemy stacks for 2 gems a turn.
Imagine someone rage running at you, and every fight you just burn their gems with Foul Vapors.
Yeah,
you can just retreat. Oh yeah, I forgot how cancer that was because it's been so long.
Yeah, it's
absolutely
almost the identity of the nation is. By the way, they can Foul Vapors, not just every big fight,
everywhere.
Any fight you take with them.
And then you get diseased, even if you lose the fight and you're in their dom, your guys start fucking coughing on themselves and get disease. So if you're not already fucking and disease is a big deal because you don't heal, right? So the Foul Vapors, if it does any damage, oh god, I forgot how cancer that it was. So for those who don't know, when you're diseased, your units will not heal. So any damage you take a fight will be permanent and it'll be on the map. So in the next fight, let's say you fought one turn, you won, and then you go in the next fight. Any damage is done is then there. So you guys are even more likely to die in the next fight. So it's super cancer, and we did not mention that till the end because I'm big dumb. But
that's fine.
Another thing that their Dominion does, just for fun at the end here, minus 5% income to candle for enemy provinces.
Yeah, just fucking shit up your opponent's land for no
Plus
reason.
1%.
Why don't people play C'tis?
They have the best
because they got this idea that it's boring because it's very linear.
Every candle gives you plus 1% income. on your own provinces. It's really strong.
So do we have a do we have a topic for next week's pod? Do we know what we're doing?
I wanted to talk about Scalaria, but that got shot down this week.
Yeah, Scalaria seems controversial. Why don't we wait till Charlie's here to bonk you over the head?
See, that's why I kind of wanted to talk about Scalaria. Like, are they strong? How strong are they?
Okay.
So,
We're
all
going
right.
too far.
So next week
We are
we will
overextended.
probably not be talking about Scalaria, but no guarantees. But that has been your All Stats No Res podcast. I hope that this episode has has been decent, but
Totally
we will.
monster.
It has been HP Sauron, Ravsier, and Dark Wolf. Hopefully Charlie will be back for next week, and we will see you next week. Topic to be determined again.